Hey guys, this is Frank Gogol, writer of Dead End Kids and No Heroin. You recently heard me on the show to talk about my new book, Dead End Kids, The Suburban Job. Dead End Kids, The Suburban Job follows three former friends who have all been deeply affected by the events of September 11th as they struggle alone to cope with the long-term effects of that tragic day and what happens to them when they find a bag of cash stolen from a local drug kingpin. I just wanted to drop by and remind you guys that Dead End Kids, The Suburban Job is currently up for pre-order. For those of you who haven't checked out the original Dead End Kids, The Suburban Job is a fresh start, a new cast and a new place with a new crime. For those of you who love the original series, we've got the entire creative team back together again to bring you more of what you loved the first time around. But whether you're a new or returning reader, I think you'll really dig the new series. If you want to check out Dead End Kids, The Suburban Job, be sure to get your pre-orders in at your local comic shop by December 4th.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Two Geeks Talking is an entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. We are joined today by a new comic creator, at least new to me, but maybe he's not new to you. He is a creator of a wonderful Christmas story, Christmas comic called Bric-a-Brac. We are joined today by Ryan Haack. How are you doing today, Ryan?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Kurt.
No problem. It's very rare that I have Christmas comics on the show, only because I've only had two. You're the second one. The first one was done by Scott King, which was a Christmas story about 10 or so years ago. Welcome to becoming the second Christmas comic I've ever talked about.
It's an honor. It's an honor.
But for those that have never read or heard about Bric-a-Brac, tell us what it's all about.
Well, for sure. It's an all-ages story, maybe more in the light of a Pixar movie that's heavily inspired by Rankin Bass movies, which I love personally. Rudolph, also Here Comes Santa Claus, or Santa Claus is Coming to Town, sorry. And, all the amazing Rankin Bass movies. And then kind of with a more fantasy element, maybe like a Star Wars and Lord of the Rings vibe together. It's almost the attempt to create a world that is a fully fleshed out Christmas world with beaches and with under Atlantis. Christmas Atlantis is actually a location. And so just to fully realize a Christmas fantasy world. And then our story really deals with largely just, a young kid kind of going out into the world and trying to stop a war on his planet, and also find his friends and try to make things right, so that Christmas spirit can return to the earth again. Or the planet again. He's essentially the only person who really has Christmas spirit anymore, because everyone else who inhabits the planet is, fighting, because the Nutcrackers have taken over. And so he goes on his mission to find Father Christmas, who he thinks could potentially use his magic to save the world. But of course, it being a story, things get more complicated for our main character, and he meets a lot of fun, interesting characters along the way. Jack Frost, or he meets some new allies that a lot of people aren't familiar with at all. One of his friends named Marie, who is older than him and helps him basically navigate the world because he's a very young kid. And so, yeah, that's basically what the story is about. And it's a very fun tale, I think, that people will really like.
I found it interesting reading the first issue there, too, as well. And for me, it was looking at the characters were beautifully drawn. I mean, the artwork is top notch, truly. Like, yeah, who's your artist for this?
So his name is, the main interior artist is Raphael Sam. Raphael is an excellent artist. He's done his own creator-owned books. He works for animation departments. He actually worked on a Madagascar tie-in comic book. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can get it in the U.S., but he did. You can see the pages out there. So he did work on that. And all around, he really, like you said, he really understands what the tone is. I'm not sure if he's familiar with the movies that I've seen with these that were kind of, I'm trying to ode to in some respects. But he really just nails it on the head with the background characters. I think this page is a good example of just all the little characters he puts in that I don't even really explained, but it is, he's trying to depict a Christmas town, so it would only make sense that there's people, decorating a big tree, or he just really nails the details.
Yeah.
Again, here's another example with they're going to the North Pole, and here they're going on a candy mountain, and there's just so many little details, and a licorice tree, and it's just really fun artwork.
And it's a great batch of characters as well too. You allude that you're almost paying homage to the Christmas films of wonderful Christmas films at that as well too. But why is Christmas important to you?
Well, Christmas, even without the religious context or without even the imagery that we know, that time of year in late December is incredibly meaningful. It has a lot of layers of meaning. Even if you're just looking at the sun and seeing like, oh, well, this, it's been really, really dark from the beginning of November to now. It's been the darkest it's ever been in the entire year. And then suddenly on December 22nd, the winter solstice, it becomes bright again. I mean, even at the base level, Christmas is meaningful, even if you're an atheist. So I think that it's a very meaningful time, even if you don't believe in anything. But if obviously you do believe in more, you add more of that Christmas, or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa, you add those layers onto, that time of year, it becomes way more meaningful and profound. And it's a time where people feel really good about themselves. They make promises to themselves that they might not fulfill in the next year, which are, New Year's resolutions. But it's a great time of year to reflect and to get nostalgic about things. And I've always gotten nostalgic during Christmas. I love the imagery. I love, obviously, the stories, and I just think it's a really important time. People are the best they are all year round during Christmas. I wish people could be that way all year. I think that people, I know that there are people who struggle through Christmas and don't have the best time because maybe loss of family members, or, potentially because they had bad Christmases in the past. But it's just that Christmas can be such a wonderful time. And I think that that's what really inspired me to tell a story about it and really fall in love with it at a very early age.
I mean, the colors, the action, you have great characters, like memorable characters. The first couple of pages really sets the tone overall, with Garrett as that wanting to go on an adventure, and he definitely gets his wish that way for sure.
Yes.
But when you were thinking about this comic itself, when you're conceptualizing it, how did it come about? Was it like an inspirational moment, or was it something you've been slowly building?
It was the slow build, because at first Raphael and I kind of met together. I found him on ArtStation about 2 years ago, so in 2018, and then a lot of the characters were developed at that point. They're models, but their roles were totally different. The Nutcracker was supposed to be a hero kind of figure. Obviously, now that they've become the enemy, it didn't take place on a planet Christmas, which I think is a huge thing that sets this apart from a lot of other Christmas stories. I think the fact that we get to travel to a lot of different places that aren't just snowy, right? I mean, that's every Christmas special. It's just snow all the time. Like, to be able to go to different places. But I think also the story did grow over time, and it kind of started growing in my mind. And I'd honestly, even when I succeeded the last issue, I knew where I wanted to go, but I hadn't even completed the story. Finally, this time I do know where I'm going to go, and obviously we're going to do another issue 3, and that'll be the complete of the story, the finishing of the story. But with issue 2, we're adding a lot more fun stuff. But in terms of the development, it was a slow burn. But I'm really happy it was, because I think I was able to really sit down and think about what I wanted to do. Instead of just making an ode to Christmas or to those great specials, I was able to really understand what it means, have a lot of thoughts about Christmas and why it's so important to me. It's not just about the music. It's not just about the Santa Claus. It's not just about this. It's not just about that. It's about, like, kind of all I said before, just the meaning in that time is so profound. And so I think that being able to sit with it for a long time and realize how important it is to a lot of people, and again, also try to realize what about those great stories like Rudolph? What is it about Rudolph that's so great? What is it about the Christmas Carol that's so great? And it's really deeply about showing people having a character go on a journey from one place. So obviously at the beginning of Rudolph is dissed by his parents, he's dissed by Santa Claus, he's dissed by all these people. And then finally he becomes friends with Hermie, and then he becomes friends with Yukon and even the Bumble. And then finally, when he returns to the threshold, he is a hero. And then the same thing could be said for Scrooge, except in an opposite way. He is an outcast, and obviously we get to see how he became that slowly throughout the entire story. And then suddenly on Christmas Day, after this, he's had this profound visitation by these three ghosts. He becomes a great person, and I don't know if it remains that way, but at least on that day he is a great person. And I think the stories could go on with the Grinch or with all these great stories. There's an arc that is basically an archetype of people and that's the same thing that Garrett goes through. And it's honestly something that I went through as a kid. What Garrett goes through is the idea of the idealization of Christmas and then the reality of it. And obviously as a kid, I really believed in Santa Claus, and I believed he existed, and I wanted to believe he existed. And I think I kept holding on to that until 12 years old. And then I just had to, I gave it up, because I had other interests and stuff, and it was just silly to me. And then you kind of hit the reality of what Christmas is. And, I don't know. I think it can be a bummer for some people when they realize that Christmas isn't about Santa. But then you start to realize the profound meaning and the value of family and all this stuff. And so that's an arc that I went through. So then we kind of mirror that with Garrett, who obviously he lives on the fact that Father Christmas exists in his planet is it's a fact. Okay, there's no denying that he exists. But the difficulty is now that there is a war on this planet that he thought was so perfect and great, and now he has to figure it out.
It's difficult too, especially when you talk about fantasy versus reality, especially as a young kid. I mean, we almost wish that sometimes to go back to simpler times in reality is sometimes always the best. And creatively, at least you're telling a wonderful story as a whole with a great message too. At least from the first book, I can't say what's going to happen in 2 or 3, and I'm sure you don't want to spoil that either. But looking at what you've created so far, though, what has been the response from book 1 into the Kickstarter, the Indiegogo campaign with book 2?
Yeah, so issue 1 was really the beginning of the journey. Really, I think it's just the true beginning of the journey. We kind of get acquainted with the character and where he came from a little bit. And we understand, he comes from this island that's very isolated, and these fairies are taking care of these children because there's this war going on. And so they're kind of at like a hostel, I guess, or maybe technically they're even like refugees, I guess you could say. But anyway, they are kind of in the Sugar Plum Cove, which is an island that gets attacked. And but in terms of the response, the journey story is people really like it, but of course they want to see more of the characters, more of Garrett kind of showing himself. He does, I think that, and if I could criticize myself a little bit, I think with issue 1 Garrett is a little generic and it moves very quickly. I mean, and that's kind of the double-edged sword when you're kind of working with something that's maybe trying to capture that Rankin Bass feel. Is the Rankin Bass movies move really quickly. They're like 50 minutes tops. I think Rudolph is like 30 minutes, but like Here Comes Santa Claus is Coming to Town is like 50 minutes, and so much happens in that 50 minutes. But I think the response is great. I mean, people love the art, people love the story, and I think people are really excited to know who Jack Frost is. So this is our big character. He's a redemptive character, and he's the main guy on the campaign, and he is this character who's gone through a lot. And he, if anything, embodies the spirit of Scrooge, right? So he's made some big mistakes in the past that tie into the origin of the war to begin with, which we will also go into because that's something that people wanted to know about, because we do just jump right into it in this one. We really do. But with this second issue, we're going to go into that war, figure out who Jack Frost is, figure out who the narrators are, who the Ghost of Christmas Past, Present, and Future are, figure out who Good King Wenceslas is, and really see this tension between Garrett and Marie, because they have two different ideas of who Father Christmas is going to be. Obviously, Marie thinks he is the greatest warrior that's ever lived, because it's true. Father Christmas is the greatest warrior that has ever been on Planet Christmas. He's defeated monsters upon monsters and protected this place with his whole being when he had all the Christmas spirit he had before the war. But suddenly when that war happens, he loses the Christmas spirit because no one cares about him anymore. They don't care about Christmas. They want to defend their home. They want to survive. And so Garrett, on the other hand, believes that Father Christmas is just a magical being. He is a pacifist. He's just like the ideological Santa that we know and we think about, the commercialized Santa to him. But they have two different ideas of who Santa Claus is, and so they butt heads about this. And they have two different agendas, basically. And so this, even though Marie is helping him, people are going to start to find out in issue 2 that there's this budding relationship between their ideals. And so, of course, that would happen with a 10-year-old kid and a 30-year-old woman who are trying to do something similar, but of course it would happen. And then we're going to get to see more of the Nutcracker's plot, and really, again, the origin of the war, which will really show us how the Nutcrackers are really being manipulated. They're not exactly in charge of this. They've been given weapons from another place outside of Planet Christmas to take over, but for a price. So we're going to find out a lot of these different things, and a lot of explanation of issue 1, which I think people have been craving, because again, we really jumped into it. It was like Star Wars in a way, but there's so much going on that it's even like the first Star Wars, like A New Hope. It kind of just jumps right into it. We don't explain who really the Empire is. It's very simple. There's a big bad guy, good guy. But with this one, we're trying to kind of show people what happened, how this came to be.
Creating a story from start to finish obviously is difficult, especially when it comes to the multitude of characters. I mean, obviously, talking about Rankin Bass is fast-paced when it comes to his type of films, especially when it came to animation as well, or at least claymation. The pacing you have for your story in basically three arcs, I would say, is seems to be fast-paced as well too. Is that by design, or is that because you're trying to save up for, Return of the Jedi type deal and getting a big payoff?
Well, I think it's both. I think that there is, I think it is both, because I wanted to, let's see here. Yeah, I definitely think it's both in a way, because I like that fast pace, because it's very simple. I do think that maybe if I had more time, it would be cool to spend more time on and understand who Garrett was. I think again, we are kind of trying to look at that Rankin Bass movie and how quick it was, and kind of apply that to this story. I also think that there's just so much more to explore, especially in the first issue. So that's kind of why the pace was so fast. And there's a lot of places to go. And also with issue 1, there's you kind of have a limited amount of space, so you have to determine what is more important, what is not. I think comics are they are a medium that's very special, because they aren't quite necessarily like where movies they have a time, like it's timed, like you have a limit in time. Comics don't have that, but at the same time there's a page limit. So like this comic is 25 pages. And I just wanted to break it into issues, because like you said, it's going to be Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. But yeah, I think the pace of the story and the choice of making it as long as I have it is really just to allude to that 3-act structure that I think it's a really compelling way to tell a story. The journey, the hero's journey. Yeah. I think obviously it's worked for many, many years, and I think that kind of 3-act structure of a story is very satisfying, especially when it is a Christmas story. It would be awkward if this is a continuing story. I don't think it would be great as a continuing, ongoing series. I think the idea of just making it a complete story works better, not only in the sense that we're again trying to allude to a holiday special, but also just because we are trying to have a character go on an arc in a kind of a short amount of time. Now, that doesn't mean that we won't have a sequel to this story in a comic book, a sequel to this main original story, because certainly there could be more conflicts on Planet Christmas. I mean, it's a massive world. We could develop more. But for this one, we are just trying to keep it very simple. And again, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And yeah, I don't know. I think the pacing is another thing where we're just kind of trying to make sure that Garrett hits those beats in terms of his character development. I want, again, him to have that arc of kind of going from the innocent child to the more to really having to face the facts that his world is not the one that the world that he thought Planet Christmas was is not that right now. It could be potentially if he saves it, but it's changed for better or for worse, well, a lot for worse. So I don't know. I just think the pacing and the way we decided to tell the story is indicative of definitely those specials. I don't think it could be an ongoing series because we have a kind of a very specific story we're trying to tell and an arc we're trying to focus on. So I hope that answers your question.
No, it's more of a curiosity on the creative process, because at least with filmmaking specifically, even TV series for that matter, you're constrained by time. You're constrained by the number of episodes a show is picked up, or you're constrained by how many thousands of dollars you have to deal with when you create a film, or millions. I'll never see that type of money, but that's beside the point. So,
and money can be a thing too.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a thing because our campaign is so much, and Raphael is a great artist and he knows his worth, and so obviously there's the money things there and the production and this. So it is like there are some limitations with what we could do with issue 1 in some of these issues, but the idea of putting them into single issues, like I would have loved to just have it as a graphic novel and be done with it. Wouldn't that be great if that could be how it was? But unfortunately that can't happen right now. So that's why we're doing the single issues. And a benefit of the single issues is that you get variant covers. People love collecting, especially with independent comic books. And then you get more exposure. Because if I was simply just to just show everyone, especially on crowdfunding, just have the first one and be like, this is going to be the entire graphic novel that I hope you can fund, I really don't think I would, be able to get that exposure. Certainly not. I mean, it took a long time to get the first one funded, and then we failed a bunch to get this one funded. So I still didn't have that exposure. And then I'm sure it'll be another battle to get number 3 funded. So I think that also that the crowdfunding determined the way we were going to tell the story as well. Like you said, the money is a huge factor in how stories are told in everything. In film, if you don't have enough money, it's going to be a low budget film and you're going to have to make some compromises. And so the same goes for crowdfunding comic books.
So why crowdfunding specifically? Because you said the first one took a long time to do and the second one failed, and then you redid it on Indiegogo, at least from what I saw. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why did you think that the Kickstarter campaign didn't work as well as your Indiegogo campaign is working currently?
I think one is definitely the time period. I think that's a huge thing. Like the time right now, it's definitely Christmas season. I know that the book is not going to be delivered to everyone on Christmas because they won't even get the funds by then. But people are thinking Christmas, and they are going to get some digital rewards, whether it be the first Bric-a-Brac by Christmas, and then 50% of the new book completely lettered. So they'll have a lot of content on Christmas. But it won't be complete. But I think that's one factor. That is one factor, is having it near Christmas. I think another one is really getting the shipping down. It took me some time to really, independent books are going to be more expensive than a book that you can just buy at a comic book store. It's just facts. Unfortunately, there's the shipping and there's this and then it's production. But, I hope I'm delivering a good product. I hope people see that I'm trying to really assemble a team and use all my skills and make a team that's really, really going to create something awesome. And that, people have the first book who have it. They know that these are pretty durable and They're not like normal floppy comic books. So I mean, they do last longer too. So there's that. But I would also say another thing is I had with the Kickstarter campaign a higher goal. And I just, after several failures, you start to realize that I'm just not going to be able to hit that one. It was, I think, 9,000 or 8,000. And so I put my goal at 5,000, and a lot of things changed. I think, namely, when people see that you are closer to hitting your goal, they are more, they want to contribute because they think that they're going to, you're going to be able to succeed. They want to see you succeed. And so I think that that's really what's going to help. Hopefully, we're at 77% right now, get me over the top on this campaign. But that's what I've found, I guess. And people have also asked me about the difference between the two. And I don't really, Kickstarter and Indiegogo, I don't see the huge difference. It's just about, whichever one gets me the success. That's all I care about. It's at the end of the day, I will switch to whichever one that, has the audience for me. Unfortunately, I didn't find it on Kickstarter, so I went to Indiegogo. And, also I think advertising yourself and talking about it, that's one thing I didn't do with the Kickstarter as much. And so that's why I've really kicked it into high gear this time, trying to just get it out as much as possible. So if anyone is doing crowdfunding, I'm not saying I'm a good person to take advice from because I've failed a lot, but I'm just saying that those are 3 principles I know that if you follow, you'll at least find some success.
Definitely. Yeah, I failed on Kickstarters before. I failed in Indiegogo as well too. And you're right. Promotion is the key, and trying to be able to physically get the word out is obviously difficult. Like, you almost feel like you're spamming your social media just to promote something that you're passionate about and that you want others to see in order to do what you can do. Hopefully it's successful. I love the quality from what I'm seeing from what you're holding up with book 1. I mean, the quality looks beautiful. I mean, the comic itself is really well done. The art is really well done. You seem to have a great team that you're working with creatively, so that's wonderful to see. So I don't see anything other than success for what you're trying to put together. So I wish you the best on that.
Yeah, I hope we can bring it. I think we can. But, you never know with these things, but I hope that we can hit the goal. I really do. But I won't give up if we don't. Again, it's a really important story that I want to tell. And so I will just keep hammering away.
Things like this type of interview is a kind of a great way to do it. So hit up all the podcasters and video interviews you can. Speaking of which, you should probably talk with Spoiler County as well. Jay Horsley is a good guy. Jay Horsley III. Good guy. I've had him on the show before. He does a lot of great stuff, and he interviews a lot of cool people as well too. So
okay,
tell him I sent you. Plugging another show aside on my own show. Oh my God, the horror, the audacity of the host. Good God. No. Anyhow, when it comes to yourself as a creator, though, is this your first foray into comics, or is this something that you're you kind of built up your resume to this point?
So I do comic books, I do prose, I do films, and I try to really keep my hands in a lot of things because I think that's the best way. If you really just focus on one thing, that's great. But I think that if you have kind of a system of things, you're much higher likely to find something that you succeed at. So that's why I try to do everything I possibly can. And sometimes it's great. Sometimes I don't have enough time to do one thing, but I try to do all things. That being said, crowdfunding comics has always been something that I wanted to do because I think it's just a great way. These platforms are awesome. And as much as they can be frustrating and it's difficult to run a campaign, it is worth it. And so last summer, I did a campaign for my anthology. So it's kind of a horror and suspense anthology. And I wrote all the stories and basically asked about 11 artists on that particular one if they would collaborate with me on these stories, just for fun. There was no deadline, no cost, or no anything like that. But it was just a very simple collaboration. And so that last summer, we had 11 stories collected, and we published those with a Kickstarter that was very, very luckily I succeeded. I knew nothing, but again, you kind of just have to go into these things really blind and just see what happens. My friend just failed a campaign with a book that I think could make $10,000, but unfortunately he just failed it, but it's, again, you have to learn the ropes, and he will eventually succeed. I know that. And so, yeah, so that's kind of was my first foray into comic books, and I launched this first one, and luckily I did succeed. And we're doing the second one, obviously right now. But as I said, crowdfunding comics, it's super fun, and you already probably know this because you said you've done campaigns yourself. But it will take a lot from you. It will take a lot of focus, probably a lot of creativity. There's no doubt about that, because you'll be checking your emails and responding to people's comments and questions. It is a business, but I do think it is worth it. It is worth it, especially if you want a printed product out there and you want to just see if it could happen. It's definitely worth it. So that's kind of been the inspiration. I think that there's so many great independent books out now, and Kickstarter gives you that opportunity to make dreams come true. And Indiegogo, they do give you that opportunity. So I think if you don't try it, if you try it, I guess this is another thing. If you try it and fail, you're not going to get in trouble. That's no one's going to put you in jail if you fail, because you don't owe anyone anything. So why not try?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's the thing with a lot of things in life. Why not try? If you try and fail, you could just obviously get up again and try again. Or if you fail, I mean, you're really no worse for wear in most situations, especially creatively. So I'd say just go for it if you're hesitating on doing a campaign. But that was really the reason why I did it. I saw a lot of people with success, and I was like, I want to do that. I don't care how hard it is. And so here I am.
And I don't know if you're aware of this either, but have you ever heard of Comics Tribe? C-O-M,
yes.
C-O-M-I-X.
Trevor.
Yeah, it's
Tyler James.
Tyler James, exactly.
Tyler James. Yes, I love his stuff.
Yeah, if honestly, that's probably the best template you can have and you can set up with your campaigns. Truly, I wish I would have known about, like, he didn't start getting into this until about 5 or so years ago, but the success that he's had in mentoring other individuals like yourself and all of that stuff, or at least his process, I should say, not necessarily him, is actually really well done. So if you're already following him, you already know about his stuff, so that's fine.
Yeah, I know his stuff, but yeah, I should definitely watch more of his videos, because he is very knowledgeable. He has a lot of good videos on how to do something. I think one way that you can surely get backers is to have an email list.
Yeah,
you have to collect those names of people who want to be your fan. I mean, they've already proven to you that they are willing to give your project money. Now, they could be a friend or they could be someone you don't even know, but they've already shown that they are interested in supporting you. So you should put them on an email list and just continue to accumulate names. Go to Comic-Cons and have your email list out in all the books you've printed, and try to do that too. And I think that's a surefire way to make it happen. Even though you need to start small. I know someone who's now making $50,000 in campaigns, who had their first campaign only 2 years ago at $100. So that just kind of shows you, after so many years of getting more people who are your fans, trying to advocating for yourself, and not letting people tell you no, and crowdfunding, and just putting it into your own hands, you do accumulate fans, and you have to have a good product as well.
No, for sure.
But
but that's the other thing, though. It's a fine line between collecting the names of the people and spamming them. You have to be very, very careful with that process, for sure. So another thing that I think is kind of underrated these days is, and maybe it's outdated or whatever, but business cards. Like, seriously, a nice business card is just something that is just good to see. I mean, it shows your creative talent, it shows what you can do in a small space, and it shows just something you can hand off at a comic convention, saying, hey, here you go. Here's something that, if you ever need to get a hold of me, this is the best way.
We did get business cards, but in a different way. So about last year, I was putting on like I said, I had the anthology. So I was putting all of those episodes on Webtoons. And they're up there now and stuff. But, I think that, again, Webtoons, I started to find out that Webtoons is really made for comics that are made for Webtoons. It's not really made for my comic books that are made in standard American format to put on Webtoons. But that's its own argument. But anyway, I I printed this business card with Mixam or something like that, and it had the name of the series and then the link for the Instagram and then the webtoon.
Mm-hmm.
And I printed all of them, and I went to Barnes and Nobles and put them in books. And I know that I'm sure no one even touched them, or I'm sure they're probably sitting there right now still, but I put them in horror sections, suspense sections, just anywhere. I don't know if this works, but I like to think maybe someone looked at it and said, oh, maybe I'll check this out, and followed me. So it's, I think you're right, though. If you actually are at a con, though, and facing the person and they're looking at your work, then I think business cards are another thing. And I think and Jason Brubaker says this too, who's a very successful, he's very successful and worked on Kung Fu Panda. And then he just made about 5 years ago, the jump into just being independent on his own, making his own books. But he said that you need to have a form of content you're giving people for free. And that's why I do a podcast, or that's why I do these other things. If you are a independent creator and you're not giving people updates on your life or content or showing people more about you, I think it's really difficult to do that. And so that's one of the things with the webtoon that I could offer people, is that, stories and stuff like that. So
and to tail off on that, and Jason's a great guy. I've known him
definitely
for a few years. He's incredible, just amazing.
Oh yeah.
Gary Vaynerchuk is a great guy when it comes to how to promote. Use your free product to promote yourself as a business. Utilizing the social media, utilizing Instagram, TikTok, things like that. As silly as you think, well, why would I want to put my comic on TikTok? But a short 1 minute thing that's seen by millions of people with very little advertising, etc., can go a long way to a simple Facebook ad or something along that line. So utilizing social media to its full extent, like Twitter, like Instagram, etc., like you're currently using, add that other layer to showcase it, especially with the last couple of days or last 12 days push of your campaign. Use all the tools that's available. It's a hell of a lot easier to do that now than it is, 10 years ago when I started the show.
And I would say also, people do the AdWords. It's not called that anymore. Keywords, or they use Facebook ads, which it helps. I see it. I definitely see the campaigns, and I almost every time, if it's something that interests me, I look at it at least. And I know that it's worked for several campaigns, but campaigns are hard, man. It's really difficult for my grandmother to understand what it is. Actually, for maybe 70% of the people who look at the campaign, they don't understand the concept of what it is, because you're pre-ordering, but it's not a store. And so there's really no guarantee that you're ever going to get the product. And so this is an issue, and it's an issue that has plagued a lot of comic books on Indiegogo or Kickstarter, is not fulfilling. And so if you're just some person who's never really bought a comic book ever, and then you look at, you want to support me, but you see this site that's, it doesn't, you don't really see, you can buy a product, but it's not going to get to you until some undetermined date. It's not desirable for a buyer, unfortunately. I don't mean to sound like so trite about it, but it's really not desirable for people who want to buy stuff. And that goes for technology too. There's the Ouya, or these really failed, whether it be the Ouya for gaming, or there's so many failed book bags, or this or this or this, that they promised the world and then it never happened.
7 years later, you finally receive something, and it's just like, okay.
Yeah. So again, it can be dangerous, and people don't understand it. So if your friend doesn't contribute, don't, take it personally, because likely they don't quite understand we're still in the early stages of crowdfunding or independent artistry on the internet. We're still so early in it. And I know that Kickstarter and Indiegogo have been around for 10 to 15 years at this point. But it's still early. We're still early in this. I think that it will become more mainstream, that people will start, making more purchases and that kind of thing with crowdfunding especially. But as it stands, we're in the infancy of crowdfunding. It's just something that is what it is. But with that being said, I think, as you said, Tyler James, I think really hits on the strategy. How do you sell things to people? If you have a book that you already had published, you can at least show people that, hey, I have this. Or so Yeah, it's a never-ending battle with crowdfunding.
Yeah. Well, it's a struggle creatively as well too. Like you said, when you're running a campaign like this, especially with what you have, you're trying to utilize the artwork that you have. You're trying to utilize, your own, how do I want to word this to draw attention to it type deal, and everything like that. And it takes its toll on you mentally for sure, especially if you're doing like a month-long campaign or 45 days or whatever you're doing.
Oh, definitely.
And it gets to the point where you're like, why, you almost get that stupid voice in the back of your head saying, why are you doing this? Why do you want to get this done? And then your rational brain says, shut up, conscience. I want to do this because I'm passionate about it. You said you mentioned ArtStation for Raphael, was it?
Yes, ArtStation is the go-to. In fact, every single day I'm on ArtStation to find artists, to find people to collaborate with. It's the greatest place. I think it's the place where all, DeviantArt has kind of came and went, risen and fallen. And I think the ArtStation is really where people should go to find artists and stuff. But yeah, I found him about 2 years ago. And Raphael, as you said, the inspiration for this story, it kind of started the moment that I saw his work. And I think that's a good sign, right? I think that's a good sign when you see an artist's work and then you're like, I know what story I want to tell. I think it's great when you have a story already in mind, but when you see an artist's work and then you're like, I know what I want to tell with this person, I think it could be, probably special. And so thankfully it worked out. And again, we developed it over the year. And last Christmas we launched the first and we're doing the second now. But our collaboration is great. He lives in Brazil. His English is not his first language, but we work well together. And, I kind of format the scripts in a simple way. And as I demonstrated with some of the pages from the first book, he knows kind of what I'm going for, whether it be adding characters in the background that, emulate the certain feel I want to give. For example, Christmasville, or if it's a dangerous situation, he also adds elements to those that, that make that seem like a dangerous situation, whether it be characters or facial expressions. He's just so great he's so great with expression, with characters, with, the cartoony feel is very effective. And I think even with some of the pages in issue 2, even more so, I think you can just see the kind of cartoony feel and how it works in comic books. And I think, the Jack Frost page is a good example where, we kind of have Jack Frost's arm kind of just popping off. And then in the next panel, he just, it comes back because he uses magic to bring it back. So it's just he's a great artist for this kind of story. It's hard to explain, but if you look at the artwork, you can definitely tell. And then when it comes to someone like Tom, who is doing, this cover here, and he also did, let's see here. He also did this. He's done all of the covers for the book. This is the variant cover of issue 1, which will be in the reprinted version. Yeah, that's Father Christmas there. And then we have our main cover for issue 2 in the Jack Frost. And then he's also doing a backup story for this, along with my friend Milton, who, it's giving more backstory to the war. But yeah, I found him through an anthology. It was not on ArtStation, actually. I found Tom through an anthology I was in called Oneshi Press. When I was just starting college, it was about, 3 years ago now, or 2 years ago. I really, really wanted to get it published in some way. And so I was reaching out to all these anthologies and sending my work. And I think I would suggest maybe doing that if you want to get published in comic books or in anything. Just write something or make a short comic book and pay for it with whatever money you have if you're just the writer, and then try to send it into small anthologies. You never know who you meet. And I met Tom with that, and we did a small comic book called Cereal Wars, which is basically just this concept where, these fake cereals kind of battle each other. It's really, it's very simplistic but fun. And then I actually found a guy to make that into a motion comic. So that's a thing. So about 2 years ago, I made it into a motion comic, which was super cool. And I kind of wanted to do some development into that because I like films, and I was like, I love this kind of storytelling, and maybe one day I will, but that was a cool thing that we did. Then we started to develop more stuff for this series. He created the design for, the reindeer for Father Christmas's reindeer, for a lot of the little elements in the story. And so he's, just been an integral part of this story too. And he's an excellent artist. He worked on, if you're familiar with League of Legends, they had a comic book on their website called Olaf versus Everything or something like that. I think there's a character named Olaf. I'm not sure. I don't know anything. I'm not well versed in it. But he worked on a comic book for that. And that's another way where I saw his work, and I realized he would be great in some really, in story. He's a great storyteller. And again, he's complementary to Raphael's artwork. In fact, some people haven't even noticed that there's a second artist. A lot of people don't even realize this isn't done by Raphael, which is good and bad. I don't think it's a bad thing. I just think it's an interesting thing, how you can have an artist so complementary. Yeah. But obviously this is very different from Raphael's style, because he would kind of have a lot. This is much more dynamic, yeah, I would say, because I think that just is Tom. If you look at his Instagram page, he comes up with character concepts, but has a very serious world around them. Like he's kind of depicting something goofy, but in a very serious context. Raphael, on the other hand, embraces that childishness, which is great. Yeah. And they're just different artists. And Milton is my friend who we were kind of talking about earlier. He's collaborating, and he did the designs. So he designed this logo here. He did a lot of the designs. We kind of made the book look like a little golden book. So if it was like a Christmas edition of a little golden book, this is what it would kind of look like. And he did a lot of the designs for that. And, he did this book called Raptor, which we were talking about because it failed on his first attempt. But he's a great artist too. And it's just, I'm blessed to be surrounded by these awesome artists and to have friendships with them, long-standing friendships. I've known all the collaborators on this book for at least 2 years. It's not like I just found out about them. I've known them for quite a long time now. So we're kind of friends in some respects. So it's just fun to have that going on, instead of them being completely new people, which is also fine. But it's just that it's nice that we've been cooking this for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, great teamwork, especially in film production, because that's what I do as well, as I do film production, etc. Mm-hmm. And so as a producer, you have to get a good group of people together, people that you enjoy working with. So when I was in university, we had a good core group of like 6 people or whatever to work with. We knew everyone's strength, we knew everyone's weaknesses, and we just gelled. It's great to see that type of collaboration come together. Everyone has 1 or 2 people that kind of inspire them on their path to where they are today. Who was that for you?
So I would say Grant Morrison is one. Grant Morrison, a comic book writer, writer of many things, and then I would say also probably Scott. This is a lot of comic book stuff, but I would say Scott Snyder, who is the current writer of several DC things now. A lot of his Batman work really deeply inspired me to start writing in general. And I started in comic books, so I would say that those 2 would be the big ones.
What about personally?
Personal inspirations. I would say, my dad, is a hardworking person. So I think that his work ethic is very inspiring to me. I want to make sure that I always have productive days and am always giving it my best effort. And to kind of mirror his work ethic. My aunt is another, has a great work ethic. So I would say that those people inspired me deeply, and showed me how, how important that kind of is, to have that. And I think, and I think also personally, the desire to tell stories kind of came from, I don't know, it's hard to see the effects. I think I saw the effects of telling stories from, maybe my sister, who was in a lot of musicals or plays, and I would get to see her. I would get to see, how that affected people or stuff like that. I think that those are my earliest experiences in seeing, I guess, how story affects people, and maybe thinking I would want to be a part of that in some way.
From a professional standpoint, you've now created a great comic book with Bric-a-Brac. You have also created other works, anthologies in your past life, and they've become successful in their own right. Do you consider yourself personally successful?
No, not quite. I mean, I think that I start every day kind of the same way. You know, the sun comes up every day, so I always try to show up. I think I think I just start clean every day. You know, I try to start clean every day. So in terms of personal success, I think that's all I need is if in one day I've completed all the tasks that I've wanted to complete. If I have done everything creatively I wanted to do, that's awesome. And I think, but kind of in a more larger scale, I think not quite. I'm not exactly where I'd like to be. I want to really try to develop more of my pod. I don't think I'm ever satisfied. If that question, I want to do more film stuff. I want to do more podcasts. I want to make sure that I can develop all these different skills that I want to have. I don't just want to be a writer of comic books. I want to be a writer of prose. I want to have a book out. I want to do all these other things. So I think in some ways I'm successful, but I do want to be successful in other things. I want to kind of expand my palette.
Where do you think your limitations are?
I know that I can't draw. So I think that's one thing that, you know, is out of the question. And I think it's, you know, I think writing and drawing, those are two fine lines. I think you kind of have to develop and spend your entire life on drawing if you really want to be an excellent artist. And I think the same thing for writing. So I chose writing, but that doesn't mean that you just have to do it in comic books. And so that's, I think that there are, you know, I guess I sometimes put limits on myself, but I think I can be a good director. I want to be a good director. I want to be a good podcaster. I want to interview people and see what inspires them to write. And so I don't think I'm limited, but I do think there are some things I can't do, namely drawing.
So the reverse of personal success is failure. How do you deal with your failures?
Yeah, this is a big one that I've dealt with this year. As I mentioned, I failed a lot of campaigns, and I think that you should look at failure as trophies. Failure, I think, is a really huge thing, because I think instead of it being a bad thing, really failure and success are both in a good category. I think the only bad thing is the absence of anything, the absence of action. That is the real bad thing. If you always have a desire and you never act on it, that is the true failure. It's not when you've tried and you failed. That's actually really good. And your odds of success when you never try or do anything are just are complacent, are so low, or they're absent. They don't exist. At least when you fail, you know that you're closer. So I think that's all I have to say there.
The younger generation are looking at your work and they're becoming inspired to either become artists or writers or creative in their own right, whatever they decide to choose. How can they inspire the generation that follows them?
I think, you know, stay true to yourself, and always. That's one thing I think, and never try to follow the trends. I don't think you should always. I mean, I don't particularly think bric-a-brac follows trends. Certainly, because if you look at the Indiegogo or Kickstarter scene, those, you know, Christmas books, they're on every once in a while, I suppose, but it's never the kind that I'm trying to tell. It's usually like Santa's bad and he's trying to kill people, or his elves are they've gone manic or something. And so I think that always stay true to yourself. And I've you know, and I always also say this with the failures and stuff. Never give up. And I would also say, if you want to inspire other people, I think the best way to do it is to just be genuinely you, and don't think about competition. If you're always genuinely who you are, there's no competition that exists, really. You know, if you're always who you are, you don't have to think about if someone has a better product than you. If you are always giving it your 100% and you know that. So I guess I would just say those three things. Yeah, I mean, I'm still learning. People would consider me the new generation, you know, so it's hard to, you know, I haven't quite, manifested all the answers about that yet, or really had time to reflect on what I've done, because I haven't done quite that much yet. But yeah, I think that it is really important to just stay true to yourself. I think David Bowie says something, don't play to the choir or something. I don't know. He's like, has an interview where he says that, you know, never try to do something that you think is going to hit with people. Do what hits with you. You know, Stan Lee says, you know, how he created the Marvel characters, write something that you yourself would want to read. And that's it. And if you're an artist, draw something that you yourself would like to see. So there you go.
It almost looked like you were reading off the page there for a second.
No. I just remember that for some reason. But yeah, it's a good quote. It's true, I think. And Stan Lee, of course, his characters have resonated. And I'm not going to go into debate of who created them, but it's true that they have really stood the test of time, and they will for a long time. And so I think that speaks to the fact that, if you really do stay true to yourself and read what you would like to, make what you would like to read, write what you would like to read, it's very likely that people will like it too. It's very likely.
I think that, not to dive too deep into that type of topic, but it's the genuinity. I'm going to use that word, genuinity type, the genuine characters that they created, Kirby and Stan Lee, for that era that has withstood the test of time. Like when you put yourself into your creations, it shows that you're giving the world a piece of yourself. And I think that you're doing the same with Bric-a-Brac. I think you're doing the same with the story you want to tell. And I think it's going to be an interesting volume 3 when that comes out. So I'm looking forward to it. Before I let you go, before I end the interview, where can we find yourself? Where can we find this site and all of that social media fun stuff?
Yes. So Bric-a-Brac number 2 is on Indiegogo for about 12 or 11 more days. So it will end on December 10th. And if we succeed, we'll be able to go into Indiegogo. So if you're watching this after December 10th, hopefully we've succeeded, and you can still go to the link, which is located, I think, right under me, and find it. And so that's where you can find this book that we're talking about. But in terms of other things to find me, I'm on Twitter occasionally. I try to post about campaigns and stuff at Haack _pro, and then I'm also mainly on Instagram, Ryan Haack _98, or on Facebook too. You could add me if you'd like. At least, yeah, you can add me if you'd like. And then that's pretty much it, though. I don't really have any other social media sites, but you can go on those sites and find my link tree where I have my YouTube and my podcast, where I kind of interview people and then read my own stories or talk about writing, certain writing techniques and stuff like that, and my the Unspeakable Text, where you can find the 25 stories that we have, and we'll be launching another campaign for about 15 stories in March. So look forward to that if you're interested in that. And that's pretty much it. I mean, my short films are on my YouTube and all that kind of stuff. So that's where you can find me mostly.
As a fellow podcaster as well, what's your podcast name? I mean, come on, you got to promote that.
Yeah, it's called Far-Fetched Storytelling. It's in its infancy, and we're still trying things. So at first, I was reading my own stories, and I thought that would be engaging. But now I've been trying to interview people. So I interviewed a prose writer, and I actually just interviewed Curtis Clow, who created Beastlands, The Wild Cosmos, and Slightly Exaggerated. These are some of his Kickstarter comic books. And he's, I think he actually was on Tyler James's channel at one point this summer. And yeah, he's a great guy. Again, someone who, if you want to know about how to crowdfund and still be creative, that's the guy to talk to. How to crowdfund and be independent. And he just made the switch into being an independent artist. I mean, that's what he does now. He doesn't have another job, which is great. And so it was just a very inspiring chat. And so I'm looking for more people like that. So yeah, that's kind of what the podcast is shaping up to be now. And it's had a lot of different identities, but we're going to find something.
Well, if you do want to interview another prose writer, I know a great guy named Chris Walsh, who he's on his second or third volume of his saga, Gold and Steel Saga is what he's called.
Okay, I'll look him up.
Canadian, great guy out of Newfoundland. I worked with him in the past, and he's been on the show. I think you two would get along famously, especially from a prose standpoint. So he has a lot of interesting, unique characters and development that way as well too.
Absolutely.
I feel like I'm name dropping all frickin' show. I'm sorry about that, but that ends this particular episode of Two Geeks Talking. Of course, Ryan, thank you again for coming on the show. I do really appreciate it. I want to have you on for Volume 3. I'd love to talk to you about your anthology as well too when you come out for those other short stories.
For sure.
Bring on a couple of other authors if you want to that time.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Pretty awesome. You can find, of course, this interview and every other interview I've ever done on twogeekstalking.com. That's the word two, not the number two, or tgtmedia.com. You can, of course, find our YouTube channel, which is now branded correctly. Thank God. Those characters are really hard to say. It is actually youtube.com/c/tgtmedia. There's a link, of course, in the show notes here. That ends this episode. Of course, tune in next week for another great interview where I stupidly double booked myself with two creative people. I have Fearless Fred, who is, of course, Fred Kennedy from a Toronto radio station, of course, creator of a lot of great comics as well. We've had him on the show in the past. We're talking about his radio play in the Star Wars universe called Mud 79, which is available on iTunes as well, which is actually really freaking incredible. I mean, if you love Star Wars, you gotta listen to that show. There's like 6-8 episodes in total, but it's really well done. Following guest then is, of course, Dust Bunny Mafia. He'll be on the show following Fred, but he'll be posted first before. Thanks everyone listening and watching. Tune in next week for another great interview on Two Geeks Talking, where everyone has a story to tell, and it's up to me to help bring that out. Thank you. Hey all, Kurt Sasso here from Two Geeks Talking. If you like this video and these quick clips here, make sure you take a look at our YouTube channel, youtube.com/tgtmedia. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe as well. Hit the bell to make sure you get notifications, of course, from videos like this here. Thank you everyone for listening and watching over the years, and keep listening and watching for new and exciting interviews with talented and creative people in the entertainment industry. I'm your host, Kurt Sasso. Thank you so much.